Hello and good afternoon. My name is Kit Cabello of Hardlens Media. We are filming live here at the Q4 radio station. You can listen to us every Saturday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. And in this special interview, we have the chair of the Northwest Indiana Green Party, Susan Brown. Susan, thank you so much for coming to the Q4 radio station and for being on our radio show earlier today. We're glad to have you here. All right, so essentially, Heartland Media has interviewed members of the Illinois Green Party and why they have joined in building a third party for potential voters. And since this is your first time on our show, can you please introduce yourself and tell us the reasons why you are building and supporting the Green Party for Indiana voters?
Okay, I believe that the genesis of this new Green Party in Indiana is kind of a outgrowth of Bernie Sanders' campaign. Many of the people who co-founded both the state and our local chapter were Bernie Sanders supporters, and obviously now we know the outcome of that race, and many people were then left with, okay, what's the next move now? What's the alternative if we don't stick with the Democrat Party? And the Green Party was something that I personally have been interested in since the 90s. And so this time around, I took a very serious look because I've been a lifelong Democrat.
Right.
So, and many of the people who co-founded the Indiana Green Party were, Bernie Sanders supporters. So, naturally, we're comfortable in that environment. But Democratic Party no longer seemed to be the correct path.
Right.
So I think that's how it came together. At the same time as the Green Party, there were also Democrats who, were interested in community activism. And so after the Bernie Sanders outcome, lots of groups have come up in Northwest Indiana, and we try to work together as a coalition. So we're one of several, at least a dozen maybe anymore, I've lost track of community organizations that are working together on the same path in kind of a bipartisan way. And that's where we're at right now.
And it seems quite clear that the Bernie Sanders campaign really left an impact not only on yourself, but other potential, Democratic voters that would have voted for Bernie Sanders.
What's interesting about Indiana is that Bernie Sanders won the primary.
Right across the entire state.
Exactly, in Indiana. And, I think so. It was kind of a natural thought process after he lost. Where do we stand now? Because as you know, Bernie has continued to work within the Democratic Party. And people had to make a decision. And so as far as leaving the Democrat Party altogether for the Green Party, it was a very conscious decision for myself, and maybe a path of looking at something different for other Democrats who still, I think because of the nature of Indiana, Northwest Indiana, which is heavily Democrat compared to the rest of the state, I think we had a little bit of a harder row to hoe than in other parts of the state because it has very heavy Democratic environment in Northwest Indiana. So that's part of our challenge. We try to work with similar groups who have similar issues and similar interests. And believe it or not, we do try to keep it as nonpartisan as we can, but it's difficult because it is a heavily Democratic area.
Now, of course, there's another issue that needs to be brought about in Indiana. Right now, the seat for the Secretary of State is open, and George Wolf, who's a member of the Indiana Green Party, he's a professor at Emeritus at Ball State University and former director of Peace and Conflict Studies at Ball State University, will be representing the Indiana Green Party. In the past, he's spoken at plenty of Indiana Green Party events. Now, according to the Green Party site, our top priority must be getting signatures on petitions to place his name on the November 2018 ballot. And the copies of the petition are now available on the Indiana Green Party website. And although approximately you guys have 27,000 signatures that are required, you're going to need an excess of 30,000 to ensure success. And as we all seen here in Illinois, third parties need to get at least 25,000 signatures or more, whereas Democrats and Republicans need about 2,000 or 8,000. So my question is this: as a third party candidate, George Wolf, what impact can the Green Party make for this election in 2018 for this Secretary of State? And what has been the Green Party's ground mission to get the voters out to support his campaign?
Well, it starts with the ballot access campaign, which we're kicking off now. George's official announcement was just made last week. Mm-hmm. So in preparation for that, there are certain locals in different parts of Indiana who are all just barely starting to gather signatures. As far as the Northwest Indiana group, we're kicking it off January 21st. That's when we have our next Northwest Indiana Green Party meeting. And if people will come to that, which will be held 1 to 3 at the Librarian Cafe or coffee shop, it's on Main Street in downtown Hobart, and we'll let you know exactly what it is that we need to do to get this going. Basically, I think right now what I'm going to put on the table is that we will be stationing ourselves at area coffee shops that work very well with the Sanders campaign. In between, letting people know about George on our Facebook page and other ways, and then inviting people to come. This doesn't preclude people from individually, stationing themselves at various places and getting signatures. So we're trying to make it as easy for people to do that, but I think you also have to be very careful with it. We learned a lot about what to avoid with the Bernie Sanders campaign so that we don't get so many thrown out, so that we do get eligible people, signatures on there, to where the state, or I should say the county, is not going to be throwing out as many signatures. Rule of thumb is, we need nearly 28, and I think we need well in excess of that just to cover our bases. And so the very first thing, and George will tell you, even though he's a six-point plan for what he would address as Secretary of State, most immediately we've got to concentrate on a plan to get him on the ballot. And then after that, we still need 2% of the voting results for that position to be considered a minor party. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a complicated process, but we're trying to work at it in a way to where it's not, it's not going to be foolproof, but that we can get as many people involved as possible. And we're going to be kicking that off at our next meeting.
Now I'm really curious about, you've talked about getting on the ballot and being recognized in Indiana as being a minor party, you need 2%. But also, what challenges will your group face also to get them on the debate stage? Because some time ago, we covered the Illinois comptroller race, and the Illinois comptroller, both the Green and Libertarian, were basically not acknowledged by a lot of the media here in Illinois to be facing off against a Democrat or Republican candidates who were running for comptroller. So what will it take to get George Wolf to be on the debate stage with his Democratic, Republican, and even possibly Libertarian counterparts?
I think it's going to take a lot of pressure, and in my experience, what puts on the pressure is the number of people involved. And that's what we're trying to do, is really get people excited about George, about the candidacy, about the impact of his candidacy. George is a very fine candidate. He has lots of ideas for the Secretary of State's office, but he also is an excellent representative of what the Green Party is all about. So we can use it as basically a way to motivate people. And educate people as to what the Green Party is about. I think that's got to be first and foremost what we need to do to get people excited about the party and get behind us to do what we need to do. We've got to grow the party. And in order to have any power after that, electorally, we've got to have ballot access. So that is like first and foremost, on our agenda right now. We're trying to take things step at a time, and I think we've basically really made tremendous progress since June, since our state congress, which officially recertified us in state after some years of dormancy. And I think we're just moving right along, step by step. As far as media coverage, we have someone now who is very adept with social media, new media, and we're not really looking to the traditional media for a lot of coverage. You know, we'll be happy to get it, but if we don't feel reliant on it. So it's just a step by step thing.
Of course, we all know that Indiana is a different state compared to Illinois. And so I think for what a lot of people want to know is what is the political history of that state? And since since the Indiana Green Party is identifying itself as a progressive party, why has the Indiana Democratic Party there not carry the banner of progressive policies? What's happening with that party? What is the political history of Indiana? Can you please let our viewers know?
Well, Indiana is traditionally Republican, conservative, on the right of the spectrum. Um, Northwest Indiana with heavily Union, heavily Democratic. So people from Northwest Indiana are fond of calling themselves the stepchild of Indiana. So we, that's a challenge that we face. Uh, there's a different environment here in Northwest Indiana than in the rest of the state, which is largely rural. In Northwest Indiana, we have Lake County, which is heavily industrial. Lake County is predominantly urban, you know, and that's a different environment than even Porter County, which is right next door. Next to Porter County, then, is a more progressive area in Michigan City and LaPorte County, which our chapter also represents. So we have different cultures that we have to consider here and how to get people on board. So I think the difficulty is that the state has become more and more conservative, further and further to the right. And of course, I don't need to tell you anything more about where the state is at, considering the Vice President of the United States is Mike Pence.
Right.
So we are the state of Mike Pence. And prior to that, Mitch Daniels. And so there's a lot to overcome. There's lots of challenges there.
Now, many people are used to voting either Democrat or Republican, or even choosing not to vote at all because they are critical of our current system. In the media, third parties are viewed as a spoiler vote or not considered newsworthy. When the Indiana Green Party holds rallies, conferences, or even canvassing events, what is the response from potential voters and from the local communities that you guys hold rallies in or events in?
Well, I think what we are in the process now of doing is creating that presence. I think we've made our presence known, and we are developing membership, and so obviously there's some reception, and basically I think it's just going to be a matter of time to, the more active we are, the more of a presence we are in the community, the more people will learn about us, the more we'll be able to educate people about us, the more they will see that we are more than just a political party, we are also a community organization. And that's something that people don't understand about the Green Party as a third party. It really has nothing in common with the Democrat Party or the Republican Party. The Green Party is truly a grassroots democracy. It's one of the top 10, it is actually the top of 10 tenets that you need to endorse to even consider yourself a Green. Mm. By that, the party means it really is a bottom-up organization, not a top-down centralized organization. So each Green Party, local chapter, whatever you want to call it, is involved with the local issues in that particular community. So I think that's how we get our message out there. We basically are active, we support other groups, and that's how we're getting our name out there. We have monthly meetings where we rotate among the 3 counties that we represent. And we are the pipeline, basically, of people. I do encourage people to come to our meetings because things are growing and moving by the minute with us very rapidly because of the political environment and people's upset with the duopoly, the two-party system, that people are looking for alternatives. So things are changing pretty rapidly, and they come to our meetings and learn not only about us, but how to become active. I found out after the Bernie Sanders campaign people would congregate and discuss where do we go from here. And they wanted to do more than just philosophize. They wanted to actually become participatory. And I think that's where the Green Party really makes a difference because, as you know, the Democrat Party and the Republican Party are very centralized, um, top down organizations, even though they profess otherwise, but we know what the reality is. And they're not working anymore because they basically they do not have any really difference between them. They support the same, corporate entities, the same elite meritocracy. There's very little anymore that differentiates them. Where the Green Party, I think, really does offer an alternative that you can put your arms around, mm-hmm. that you can actually work at and make a difference as an individual.
So there's another issue here in Indiana that I don't think a lot of people really understand. Harlan's media has covered this from time to time, and it has to really deal with the people in East Chicago, Indiana. Of course, there's other communities that are dealing with it as well. But let's focus right now on East Chicago, Indiana, in the West Calumet housing community. Excuse me. They've been basically at the end of getting forced evictions due to their community being built on top of the remnants of a lead refinery. And this community is mostly comprised of working poor and who are mostly people of color. Unfortunately, the lead in many of the people are at high levels, and children are being affected the most with headaches, breathing troubles, and other physical ailments. This is an example of government at all levels failing the people, and at the same time highlight the clear class differences within our society. What is holding back proper government response of water contamination, and what has been the Indiana Green Party's response to working with the activists helping those people in those communities? Because you've talked about it on a radio show, but I think we really need to understand what your group is trying to do with the local activists, and why is there a lack of proper government response, not only for East Chicago, Indiana, but perhaps there are other communities that are also dealing with their own version of contamination and toxic waste being in their communities.
Well, need I say any more than Flint, Michigan? Mm-hmm. It's basically the same government indifference. We're looking at these two crises that are very similar, and nothing is being done. In Flint, Michigan, it's been how many years? 5 years?
It's been acknowledged in 2016 at least that there's a problem there, but it's been going on much longer.
Oh, much longer than that. I remember when it first started, when they hired that emergency management manager, to deal with that. So the Flint problem has been going on a very long time. We see that even though Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders both went to Flint, Michigan, mm-hmm. That was the power of, at that time, especially Clinton, of course, of the Democrat Party to actually put their arms around that and make it an issue, and it just became one of many other issues. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing in East Chicago, basically. I think it's been used as a political football by the two entities, in a political way, rather than looking at the human element of what's going on over there. And that's typical of the major parties. I think that's where the Green Party differs. We are looking at the human element, the human loss, and we are, with the other groups, getting together. I want to mention in particular 350 and Community Strategy Group, which some of our members work with them. And we're there at the meetings, we're there at the protests, we're there at the rallies. We're trying to keep on the pressure. And protest, that's the only thing we can do at this point, is keep up that pressure through the protests. Because right now there is great government inattention to anything environmental. Scott Pruitt came to East Chicago, and whether he saw us or not, we don't know, because the long black limousines came many feet away, right? Mm-hmm. And went into the school, talked to some local officials, and there was no dialogue with the people that's actually impacting. So all we can do is keep on the pressure, keep knocking on the door.
Mm-hmm. So when we look at Indiana, it has a very similar history like many Midwestern states. And that is the fact that many factories and businesses are being shut down. The result of this has led many communities to suffer, and in turn, there's vast amount of depression, homelessness, drug addiction, and many people in those communities are wondering how they can survive. Currently, at least for our viewers, so they get a better grasp of what's really happening in Indiana, what is the situation in that state, and what has been the response from the state government that you said is predominantly mostly Republican? What has been the response to really offer some form of relief to people who basically have no jobs or lack of jobs?
I can't really see any. I mean, I'll just be frank and leave it at that. I
Mm-hmm.
really, I can't see any substantive attention to these issues beyond tax issues. The state likes to speak, to the fact that it's attracting businesses from elsewhere and developing businesses and getting commitments from businesses to come to Indiana. It's planning. I don't know if you've seen the ads recently, the
Are
surrounding
you talking
states.
about the ad saying "Thank you, Michael Madigan,"
Yeah,
where at the same time no one really understands by the fact that there's a lack of taxes, there's a lack of revenue. So really, what is that impact of basically saying we have low taxes here in Indiana, but at the same time too, what relief can be given to the people though?
well, it's an anti-tax state. It always
Mm-hmm.
has been. I
Right.
mean, um, as far as any kind of social welfare, I mean, it's a dirty word in Indiana,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a business-oriented state, and most of their attention is on the business, not the individuals. So I mean, you see this with the tax caps. Much of the tax caps, the residential tax caps that came about a number of years ago, gave great relief to industry.
Right.
And what the result of that was, industry saw a lot of relief from the property tax caps. But what happened to state and municipal government? It shorted the revenue coming in, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And what's happened with cities and towns is that they have imposed, I mean, their expenses don't go down, their responsibilities don't go down, but their property tax revenue is limited. So now we see an explosion of all kinds of fees, backdoor ways of collecting that money just to keep government going. So at the same time that we're seeing these governments struggling to survive, they are handing out uh, salaries now to public servants that are, comparative to the private sector. So we've seen a privatization, a business-oriented approach to running government in Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what's missing in Indiana is again that human element. How does this affect the everyday citizen?
Right.
The companies that are coming in are paying $12 an hour. They're really touted as something really special and wonderful, and isn't this great? And look what we could offer them as far as tax incentives and tax abatements. But pay is not there, and it's considerably less than in metropolitan Chicago. I mean, you can, from Northwest Indiana, I would say it's about 40%, of people living in Chicago. So it's a good deal for people moving from Illinois into Indiana, but conversely, no. So I think it's a huge problem. Economics in Indiana is just a mess.
So we've all seen how money in politics has affected our democracy, and for the most part, the person with the most money wins elections. In Washington, D.C., we have seen how banks, Wall Street's corporations have influence over political parties in Washington, D.C. It affects both Democrats and Republicans. In Indiana, though, who are the groups that have the most control over elected officials and wield their power, especially during elections? There's going to be an election in 2018 for the midterm nationwide. Who are going to be the key power players in regards to donating to both Democrats and Republicans, especially in Indiana?
Well, it's the usual suspects, business, industry, tycoons, so on, but et cetera. But I think the important issue is the reverse. In other words, the Green Party is the only party that does not accept corporate donors. It's a very important difference between the Green Party and the two major parties. we accept no corporate donations. So we are reliant on donation, private donations, membership dues, and it explains, of course, why I think the Green Party has not made the same progress, just because you don't have the basic huge revenue to advertise, to do the kind of things that the major parties do with donations. But at the same time, that makes grassroots democracy so important. We don't need all those books because we do a lot of that for ourselves on a local level. So I think that the corporate donations is very important to some of our members. Even membership dues are very important because we're a bottom-up organization. So even our membership dues, even according to our policies, platforms, bylaws, and visual bylaws, even our dues can be waived, if people have problem meeting that basic responsibility, and yet their membership voting rights are still there. So I think that's a major difference. People have to remember that we are not the handmaiden to, the corporate elite. Mm-hmm. And we deliberately stay away from that. And I think people need to begin to understand you don't have to run a party, you don't have to have a party or win office and have millions of dollars if you get the people power.
Right. So let's actually talk about another issue that the Green Party is known for, and that is basically running on a campaign of clean environment, green energy, and strong environmental protections. Indiana, for the most part, has the most relaxed environmental laws in this country. So essentially, real quick, could you at least, let our viewers know really the impact of this lack of regulation on small communities? Just real quick.
Oh, gosh. They are myriad, and all I can do is point to East Chicago. Mm-hmm. I think that the individual communities, the cities and towns, on the local level, basically do put a lot of pressure on their local officials. Mm-hmm. And I think there may be some more responsibility because of the lack of federal protection. And we of course support that. When you get into a big situation like like the East Chicago deal, then there we are. We try to put the pressure on the right people, but I think people have to understand they really do have to become involved. And I think that's the biggest thing that we need to do is motivate more people to knock on the doors of those federal officials, their federal representatives, and demand the kind of protections that they're there to provide.
All right, and real quick, where can we find more about you guys on social media so our viewers can learn more about your group?
Indiana Green Party is the Facebook page for the state party, mm-hmm. and then we have our own Facebook page, which is Northwest Indiana Green Party. All right. And then we expect, if it's not already up, we're going to have a website.
All right, fantastic. This is Kit of Heartlands Media. Peace, everyone. Let's all do what we can to build a better future. All right, we did it. One cut.
You're watching Hard Lens Media.